Hey guys, HaloTheorist back with my 7th podcast. Today I have my great friend Matt. He's going to be coming on to the podcast today. And actually, today we're going to talk about a very big topic that I think both myself and Matt have kind of been looking at with Halo and in the recent years, and as things have been kind of flowing into the development with 343 and possibly here with Halo Infinite, which I hope we get to cover a lot in this podcast, just how Halo itself has affected gaming. And there are many YouTube videos and stuff out there that have talked about this and whatnot, but I kind of wanted to get a personal opinion from someone else who enjoys another sci-fi genre, Mass Effect. And Matt here knows a lot about Mass Effect and kind of see the impacts that Halo has given to not only get other games, but even sort of the same sci-fi space opera genre, and maybe how now that could be returning to Halo Infinite and how it's going to be played. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Matt. Feel free to introduce yourself and everything, and take it away with what you want to talk about, man. Yeah, I definitely played that when it was somewhat where it was the game was very linear still in levels, but there was some options for exploration. Yeah, I can see that.
I would expect Halo Infinite to be more along the lines of that open world style to Gears 5 rather than Mass Effect, maybe.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, do me a favor and kind of describe the Mass Effect, because like you're really into that, and describe like what makes Mass Effect appealing and maybe why like people are thinking that this could be somewhat more like that game and the way that that game plays.
yeah, so, I mean, Mass Effect is like a role playing style, third person action shooter, cover based, even action shooter. And it plays a lot like a role playing game, it plays a lot like a shooter, and just that whole style of choices and everything. Open worlds are kind of open world, but they're not. And so that whole idea of that Mass Effect style, which I really enjoy, I really love the idea of how they create this idea of choices and characters and worlds that are super fleshed out, super in depth, have a lot of questions to ask, have a lot of they make me want to know more about it. And I think Halo Infinite could follow that.
Well, I definitely see that Halo Infinite could follow something like that, but in the most traditional sense of Halo, and I know that like you and I have played a lot of Halo. I mean, we played Lasso, we've played multiplayer and stuff like that. Halo is a very linear game. I mean, like it's kind of like a point A to point B in every level, and doing objectives along the way, and that's kind of how. And with the topic, what we're talking about here, how Halo defined a first person shooter. You're going from point A to point B, you're taking out many enemies along the way, and there are objectives that you need to complete or things that need to happen, and in that, there's a great story. And as you were kind of saying to me a little bit before we were starting the podcast, something that I wanted to talk about was how 343 is different from how Bungie has taken the approach to Halo. Not so much in the sense of like how they've done the levels, but in what they entail in the levels. So throughout Mass Effect and stuff, there's always things you could pick up. There's journal like stuff, there's codex entries and things. Like you're able to accumulate all this knowledge while in game, and then you're able to read up on it, and it's very optional too. A lot of these things are you can just go through the main story of the game, and you can have an outcome and you can complete the game. But what Mass Effect offers really is the ability to do side quests, the ability to do all this other stuff and kind of explore more of the universe and change what happens. And unfortunately for Halo, and I don't really know if it'd be unfortunately because it really is Chief's story to be told by someone else. we don't really get to see that sort of idea of choice in what's happening, because that's not who Master Chief is. He's his own character now, and that's how 343 has depicted him. But going back to what I was saying a minute ago with before and how Bungie handled it, Chief was a very quiet, low-spoken individual that kind of just was all action and body movement. And it kind of gave the ability for everyone to somewhat identify and step into the character, very similar to the Mass Effect series, because again, Shepard, the main character that you play as in the Mass Effect series, is supposed to be who you identify with, because you're literally making the choices. And Bungie did just enough to make it so like you felt like you were Master Chief. But now with kind of 343, it seems a little bit different. It seems a little bit more like, he's his own character, that he really has his own thoughts and his own ideas and his own feelings. And so what do you kind of feel like is your take on that then, Matt? Like, how do you feel like the direction that 343 has gone so far with it? I know like Halo 4 and Halo 5 weren't well received by a lot of people, especially compared to Halo 2, Halo 3, and Halo Reach, which were like the top of the line games when they came out and really sort of defined the genre, which again is what we're talking about. So what do you think is like the difference? What key element do you think they're missing, and what do you think that they could learn from games like Mass Effect and other games that are doing well right now that could make it that great again?
For sure. I mean, like you were saying, like the original Halo trilogy had depicted Master Chief as this quiet hero that was fighting massive battles to save the world, And whenever Bungie made Halo Reach, they kind of began to take that way of storytelling a little bit different. Halo Reach was a very much more personal story. And a lot of people didn't like Halo Reach for other reasons, such as some of the new mechanics they introduced into the game. But Halo Reach itself was a more personal story following Noble Team, as they were just trying to survive during the invasion of Reach. And so what 343 did was they made the Chief, like you were saying, a much more personal character with flaws and in his own motivations. They made a character, they made Halo 4 this story that was, in the grand scheme of things, would impact the Halo universe tremendously. But the center point of Halo 4 was a story between the Master Chief and Cortana, and his role and his desire to try to save her. And that was the goal of the game, was to save Cortana, to save her from rampancy. And so a lot of people didn't really care for that whole idea of making the Chief. Chief has more lines in Halo 4 alone than he ever spoke in the original Halo trilogy. And I think a lot of people didn't like that. They made Chief kind of human. He wasn't just this insane badass that was going out there throwing bombs back into Covenant ships and just annihilating the Flood and the Covenant. They made him more human, and his whole personal struggle within him. And I mean, it took Halo 5, and I mean, we all know what happened with Halo 5. Well, we really don't.
Yeah, it's like, that's funny you say that. We know what happened, but at the same time, we don't. Like,
because Halo 4, like, honestly, Halo 4 to me is probably one of the best Halo stories there is out there. And that's a very debatable opinion between the Halo community.
Yeah, I agree. I love Halo 4. I love the idea of where he went, just due to the extended the lore and the novels and whatnot that kind of show a little bit more about Chief, and getting to see that part of him in game. So it's funny that you say that too, because even in Halo Reach, like you were saying, after Bungie finished Halo Reach and 343 took development into Halo 4 and whatnot, even Halo Reach, and I kind of forgot about this, Noble 6 is exactly like a Shepard, Mass Effect character that you can step into.
For sure.
And you can see and do that with, because he's your own customizable character. I mean, at the end, obviously he dies, which is, laughably debatable.
And he's in a cave on
stuff
Reach.
Like that, yeah. Yeah, he's in a cave on Reach. and stuff like that. But I find it funny that you said that, and I wanted to say something there where it's like, yeah, dude, you're right. They did do that, and they changed it. And so, do you feel then that bringing that back for Infinite, like the old school badass Master Chief? I mean, you saw the Discover Hope trailer,
For sure.
where Chief is about to go out the back of the Pelican, kind of similar to a Halo 2, like you were saying, dropping bombs into Covenant ships, sort of scene there. Do you think that that's what the approach that 343 is going to go back to?
I think there's room for there to be kind of a happy medium. Because I really enjoy Chief as this great, amazing badass. And I mean, like in games like Halo 4, there are still those moments, you know? And but I think they can definitely reach a balance between in complete total badass, destroying the Covenant, destroying the enemy, whoever it may be in Halo Infinite. Theories the Flood and the Banished, hopefully. Or, make him a quiet character, because we know, like, Cortana is still a character in this universe. Like, she took over the Guardians, and now she's, like, pretty much just annihilating everything. She caused almost all the AIs across the galaxy to revolt, right?
Yeah, to like defect and
yeah.
turn to her, yeah.
So, and I mean, you had a video or a podcast about, like, is Cortana infected with the logic plague, which could explain why she is the way she is now, saying that that is the only possibility. So, but with
sorry.
But no, so with that, I think it's kind of hard to make it a non-personal story with the way that Halo Infinite is set up. Like, it's kind of hard to do that with Cortana set up the way she is as the possible main antagonist of Halo Infinite. And, but the moment... sorry, go.
You're good. No, I was going to say, where I like to would go with that, like you're saying, how Halo Infinite is set up. Noah and I, one of the other members I talk with on the podcast a lot, we really get into sometimes about how set up Halo Infinite is, and just all of the storylines and all of the things that are kind of converging around Halo Infinite. I mean, with Cortana and what you're saying with how she is and everything, and kind of gonna rewind us back here to the topic of the podcast with how is Halo affected gaming as a whole. They really are setting up a galaxy, like, universe-wide game here for Halo, where you have the Banished and the Spirit of Fire and the Halo Wars stuff coming together. You have Spark and, like, the last video I just made, and him surviving the events of Halo 3 and now wanting to possibly come back, and the Smoke and Shadow and the crew of the Ace of Spades, which is the main who you follow in that book, is looking for the Spirit of Fire still, so they obviously might play a role. You have Chief and Cortana, which will probably always be the main characters. You have Alpha 9, which is the crew from Halo 3 ODST, even getting back together through books in, like, Bad Blood. So it really is like taking every aspect of Halo, especially a lot of the parts that made it great, and putting it back into this big game now. And so my idea of, like, how is Halo Infinite going to cover all of these huge big topics and everything? They have so much expanded lore potential to pour into this game, but at the same time need to balance the idea of where I think 343 was originally going with Cortana, because I believe that Halo 4 was the game that it was intended to be. I believe Chief was supposed to be a little bit less than he has been, and I think if Halo 5 had been what we'd call a standard game, then any game, I think that's the game where we see that Chief is human. He is like that.
For sure.
And so now, going back to the original games, like Halo CE, and that when it came out and how revolutionary it was, I mean, Chief wasn't supposed to be some, developed character and anything like that. Like, that's where he was supposed to fall in line as a character, was just a genetic cyborg thing that no one kind of knew yet, and go around and kill, aliens, and you're just supposed to discover all this shocking awe stuff and everything. And even in the developer commentary and whatnot, there's just so much about how the story was kind of different. And, even in my videos that I put, a lot of YouTube videos, I showed that Bungie actually pulled a lot of old lore from games like Marathon and things like that, which if you haven't played those, I don't blame you. Not a lot of people have. But pulled a lot of lore and stuff and a lot of ideas from those games and poured them into CE. And so we have the game that we see now, but that game that we played, the linear style, and kind of, again, going back to the podcast topic, and how it played, a twin stick shooter, that was kind of the first thing we had ever seen on console. And then Halo 2 took all of that and revolutionized it again. But before we go to that, I mean, like, what is your take on Halo Combat Evolved? What do you think? I mean, that's kind of where Halo Infinite's coming back to. Yeah, that's where Infinite's kind of coming back to, is where this all started. And that's what I think Halo 5 was supposed to come back to, if you look at a lot of the early trailers. But it didn't. There was a lot of rewrites in that story and whatnot, and we don't know the developer commentary and stuff on that yet, which I think we would like to know at some point, but we don't. So until then, we can speculate. But I hope Infinite is going back to CE. And what do you think about CE and Halo 2 and Halo 3 and how it's going to come back and how those games revolutionize the sci-fi space opera, FPS and twin stick shooter, even the multiplayer? I mean, Colin, Noah, and I talked extensively about the multiplayer in a podcast. Not my last one, but the one before that, episode 5, and Halo revolutionized that kind of stuff. So what do you think that Infinite could do, is doing now, and is pulling back? What do you think of those original games?
Yeah, you're definitely right with, like, Halo took the world by storm. It was first originally going to be an RTS, if we all remember correctly, on the Mac. And then eventually it found its way to being a first-person shooter as a launch title with the Xbox, which was made from Microsoft.
Yeah, like a total 180.
Like, completely 180 with that. And so I think if that wasn't the case, like, we definitely wouldn't have Halo like we have Halo today. And so, but yeah, Halo took the world by storm. Halo 2 took the world by storm. Halo 3 took the world by storm. It took the world by storm enough. It was that impactful in the gaming culture from over a decade ago that people were trying, like, games that PlayStation and Sony were trying to put out, were trying to market them as Halo killers. It was that impactful, and it was that big. Halo is like is the flagship of the Xbox brand. Like, if I ask you, what do you think of, like, when you hear PlayStation? Of course, if I say Nintendo, you're going to think Mario.
Yeah, exactly.
But if I say PlayStation, it's like, what do you think of? It's kind of hard. Like, sure, PlayStation has a lot of great exclusives, and
but there's no one defining, like, game that's like, this has been PlayStation since day one.
And so when people think of Xbox, most people think of the Master Chief and Halo. Of how defining that game was for every game to come out after that. I mean, it wasn't the first-person shooter out there, but it wasn't the first, like, twin stick.
It was the first twin stick shooter, and by twin stick, for everyone who doesn't know, when you're handling a controller, it's the idea of moving with one stick and looking with another, and this creates with the controller a very fluid movement in the player, so that they're able to interact with their world, not seamlessly, obviously, but much easier. I mean, if you think about it now, Matt, you and I play, and, like, we don't even take into consideration the controller we have in our hands. Like, we're just like, it's second nature to us. We just look at it. But that design of how they did the twin stick is now used everywhere today. I mean, in, like, every single first-person shooter, and a lot of third-person shooters too. Like, they use, the right stick for looking around and the left stick for moving. And so we just take it as second nature today with the amount of games that we play. But for people who haven't played, it's funny that I think about this now, because even, like, my girlfriend or people that, I remember I encountered that weren't very good at games yet, had to kind of get used to using two sticks like that. Because if you think about other consoles, even the PlayStation and whatnot, the PlayStation 1 didn't have the sticks. It just had the analog buttons. And
Mm-hmm.
the Nintendo 64 or even the GameCube, I mean, the GameCube came out and it was a little bit, kind of twin sticky, but not exactly. And the N64 only had one stick in the center. So, I remember playing GoldenEye on that, and that was like, whew, God, that was hard. Like, I try to play that now, and I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I'm not this coordinated. And I feel bad because I'm like, younger me could do that. But the twin
Right.
stick that I'm so used to now, I mean, it revolutionized it. And so,
Totally.
with
And
the
I mean,
seamless, yeah. Sorry, you're good.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Not only like with the twin stick revolutionizing single player shooting gameplay, like look at the way the Bungie created the artificial intelligences of Halo Combat Evolved. Different enemy types acting differently and presenting new challenges to the player. You know, completely revolutionizing. Like elites acted different than grunts and jackals and hunters.
Yeah, their
And then
classes were
especially
pertaining to what they were
for
good
sure.
at. Yeah, and that actually that progressed too. It's always
Yeah.
progressed throughout the games. And so please continue. But I think about that stuff and I'm like, God, you're so right. I love talking to my friends about this because it's so great to think about that and then just expand on it to the end of the universe of at least the Halo universe. So
And then even with Halo 2, like they added the brutes in and they still acted different. Halo 3 just completely blew everything out of the water. Halo 3 is considered one of the greatest games of all time. And Bungie did that. And Halo as a brand, as a name, carried a lot of weight in game culture, carried a lot of weight. And when Bungie decided to wrap things up with Halo Reach, you know, and move on to leave Microsoft, join on Activision, and come up with their new IP, Destiny, a lot of fans were pretty upset about Bungie leaving, and then Microsoft commissioning like 343 Studios to continue on with making Halo games. And what their first project was Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, right?
mm,
And that was their first main project, which is pretty hard to mess up. You're just remastering a loved classic, which was
well,
great.
I find it funny that you say that though. I mean, not to criticize 343 or anything here, but there is actually something that's funny about what you said. Like, they weren't, they didn't have a lot of room to mess up, like you said. But something that is there is, it's very weird. There's actually a lot of texture issues. There's a texture shader, that a line of code in the Gearbox port that it was, and what I mean by the Gearbox port is Halo was originally designed on the PC, but was made for the console. And then it was actually ported to PC via Gearbox, so the software developer that's made like
Yeah.
Borderlands and stuff like that. But when they were doing that, they actually messed up a line of code for all shader textures, for texture shades. I think I don't remember which way it is. I'm not that good with code, but it's for the shading of textures to make it look 3D. And the games that we actually see now, the Halo Combat Evolved that we see in Combat Evolved Anniversary, the original MCC, and even here on MCC for the PC, and for the original on the PC, are all actually not the correct representation of the original Halo Combat Evolved. If you look at things like Captain Keyes, he actually isn't wearing the same uniform that he is in the original game for the Xbox. And at first I thought it was crazy because I remember thinking those things because I played Combat Evolved extensively and saw that kind of stuff. But now I watched a video and I forget who it was by. It was another YouTuber. Please don't give me credit for finding this because it wasn't. I saw this and I was like, oh man, that is true. But now you have to do like certain things in order to get like those shaders and stuff to show up. Like you have to actually shine like a dynamic light on the walls and stuff of like Forerunner floors and walls and things like that to see the great textures and stuff that Halo CE is. And so even taking that into account now and bringing it again back to what we're talking about, Halo CE is even better than we were originally, than we're seeing it on Master Chief Collection, than we're seeing it on that. Like, yes, now we see it at 60 frames per second, and it's all nice and smooth and everything, but there are actually things about Halo CE that were made that are even better, and so it's kind of sucked that 343, and I'm sorry to go on such a big tangent here, that 343 didn't fix that while it was, while they were remaking the original Halo Combat Evolved. So yeah, I'm sorry to go so far out on that, but I remember
No, you're
seeing
good.
that, and that's crazy that that's such a revolutionary game that they didn't port it, that they didn't convert it 100% correct. Everything that we play on now is from that Gearbox port that has incorrect shaders and stuff on it, which suck because
I did actually see a video about that. Yeah.
yeah, it sucked. But yeah, please continue with what you were saying earlier about 343 taking over as Bungie left and whatnot.
You know, a lot of fans were curious as to what direction like 343 Industries was going to take the Halo franchise. And like we already talked about Halo 4 and that style of gameplay that it brought to the Halo franchise, that style of making Master Chief more of a human character, more personal, more human, more of an in-depth character with more lines, with more to him than just his Spartan armor,
Mm-hmm.
and more than just casual one-liners like permission to leave the station. What purpose, Master? Give the Covenant back their bomb. Like, that's totally badass. And those are moments from the original trilogy, And we didn't get to see that same exact style of Master Chief writing in the 343 games with Halo 4 and Halo 5. It's like we already talked about. It's non-existent. Like,
Yeah, it's
you
all
have to make
over
up
the
the story
place.
as you go.
Yeah, that is a
I've
good
seen that
meme.
Captain Keys meme.
Yeah, that's it made me laugh. I won't lie. And I'm not necessarily here to bash on the game, but I mean with
No, for sure.
all of the
And it
stuff that
sucks. Like,
happened, yeah.
yeah, Halo 5 is totally like from the game that it was at launch with multiplayer and everything included. Like, it is a far cry of what it was at launch.
Yeah, I mean
Halo
they didn't
5 is
have
honestly one of my
Forge
favorite
at
Halo
launch,
games now.
which sucked.
Yeah.
So
Halo 5 is one of my favorite Halo games now.
well, and
Like,
mostly that's based on multiplayer, right? Like that's where we have a lot of fun.
Exactly.
And
Totally.
and Noah and Colin and I in our podcast 2 podcasts ago we talked about that, but kind of dialing back to Halo 4. What do you think, about Halo 4's multiplayer? I mean, they had Forge. That was, I would say, it was different than Halo 3's and Halo Reach's, but I wouldn't say it was worse. But the multiplayer in it was it was different. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. So 343 really changed up a lot. Completely overlooking the multiplayer in my discussion. I'm talking just about the campaign, but yeah, the multiplayer was made more to be more similar to a Call of Duty style, with the creative class system.
Yeah, there were classes and whatnot. You could customize them prior to going out. Yep.
They added unlimited sprint compared to Halo Reach, where it was an armor ability, but sprint was now just the default thing that you do like in any other shooter. And a lot of people argue it sped up the pace of the game, or it honestly made the gameplay slow down, and that's up for debate. But they changed a lot. They made the game more like a Call of Duty style shooter. And there's a lot of incredible Halo fans that were just kind of put off by that, And the Forge was a shell of itself, I thought, It just didn't seem nearly as in-depth as it could have been. They're also developing this game towards the end. Now, Halo 4 looked fantastic. One of the best-looking games of that console generation.
Yeah, I think with what they had on the 360, 4 was about as far as they could have pushed it. Yeah, I think that.
Right.
Yeah, if they had waited for a next-gen console, the game would have looked not better, but just crisp, 60 frames per second and stuff like that.
Right. So I think they were limited to what they designed Forge to be because of the limitations of the hardware present when they made Halo 4. The 360, Halo 4 came out in 2012, literally right at the end of the lifespan of the 360, in the Xbox One being introduced.
Yeah, and I've never
And
looked at it in that perspective of like you're saying where, maybe it wasn't the developers, but it was the console's limitations that kind of prevented 4 from being huge in Forge and being huge in multiplayer and whatnot. Because even Halo 4 came on 2 separate discs, if you remember. And it also
right,
included Spartan Ops as well, which, while it doesn't feel like it was very fun for a lot of people, it was a lot of content. That's still
it was.
that's still content that has to be packed in there, and so it was a yeah. I've never looked at it
I mean,
from that perspective. I find that very interesting, and I really like that perspective. I really can sympathize, and I would say I can even empathize with 343 and saying like, yeah, you guys didn't, you kind of got the short end of the stick there, but you still made a great
right,
campaign. You still did, at least in my opinion, you still went great with it, but had they waited for the Xbox One, I think we could have had more of a game like with Halo 5 multiplayer, but with Halo 4 story as Halo 4, and it would have been I
for
would
sure.
say almost on in line with maybe even like a original trilogy game. So
And I mean, I personally think that they might have had the goal of making Halo 4 Forge to what Halo 5 Forge became. Because Halo 5 Forge is honestly, it's very, it's not very new person friendly, new player friendly.
no,
It's
it's
very
definitely a
complex.
sharp, like huge learning
I
curve. Yeah,
A huge learning curve. I had to spend hours just in one night just trying to learn the controls because they not only did they make it more intense, which honestly made community made maps feel like developer made
yeah,
maps.
the
That's
developer
how insane
level
Forge
made
was.
maps. Yeah,
And so, but with that, you know, spend hours on end just learning the basics of Halo 5 Forge versus like Halo Reach Forge, which to me is personally my favorite. I really enjoyed Halo Reach Forge because of how simple it was yet
yeah.
complex.
So before
And
going
so,
to Reach Forge, though, I mean, think about Forge in itself, though, and how revolutionary that was as well. Like imagine like before Halo 3, and yes, like I agree that like I like Reach's Forge more in some in some I guess areas, but in Halo 3, man, we had nothing like Forge like that on the console. Like
very
map
true.
builder that we could share and that we could do that and play custom games with and everything. I mean, that's kind of part of the multiplayer podcast that we had earlier, but for the revolutionary perspective, how big of an impact that was on Halo 3. And then for them to expand on it in Forge World and Halo Reach, I mean, all I can
For
say, Matt,
sure.
is like take it away, dude. Like you played, I'm sure played tons of Forge and Halo Reach, and so did I. But please, like, let people know how your experience was, because I mean, it's not always all the same, but we all had a great time.
No, definitely. And I think, yeah, I mean, Halo 3 launched with Forge, and it was this whole new concept in Halo game. And very simple, no over the top like map building like you could in Halo Reach 4 or 5. And with that, we saw the rise of Halo Reach Forge. They took it away and made something even greater with Halo Reach Forge. They just expanded upon everything. And like we were saying, like Halo 4, I think tried to expand on it, but with the hardware limitations of the 360, I believe, the way that they were trying, the direction they were trying to go with Halo 4, um, how great it looked, and the everything about Halo 4, they couldn't exactly do what they wanted to do with Forge until next gen consoles, Halo 5.
Yeah, we see how
And
crazy Halo 5 is now. Where like they felt like they had to almost make up that gap.
I mean, people can do Forge now on PC, Halo 5 Forge.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
It's
crazy.
insane.
Yeah, it's crazy because you like you were saying, they feel like developer made levels and stuff like that. They feel like
Exactly.
that kind of quality, and really, I mean, you don't see Forge in hey, you don't see it in Modern Warfare or sorry in Call of Duty. You don't really see it in a lot of games. Like for Halo to be so linear in campaign yet so dynamic in multiplayer and custom games and Forge and whatnot, I really feel like
And
that. Yeah, that's kind of what keeps Halo on its toes, like keeps it going really well.
like Halo is definitely like it's definitely a story-driven game, characters, lore behind it. But I think more importantly, like Halo defined itself as a game you can take to people's houses and set up LAN parties, have fun together. It was a community building game. I have memories of you setting up Halo 3 LAN parties at your house and we all going over there and playing the absolute crap out of Halo 3 custom games. As simple as it was,
Yeah,
it
even
was the
though like
funnest thing
4 had
ever.
come out, even though there were other games, like you're right, that kind of aspect and going back to my last podcast with game chat and things like that, I feel like unfortunately what Halo has done so well they kind of went back on. I mean, Halo 5 didn't have split screen and that's kind of huge, for
Yeah.
games and whatnot. MCC kind of had to make up the slack in that area, but still, I mean, we don't see that kind
It's
of those LAN parties. We don't see that kind of new meetings with friends and people like that, especially in real life. Most of the time, especially in Halo 3 and Halo Reach days, we made friends over Xbox via game chat,
totally.
and not now we're
It's
all stuck in party chat. So
definitely.
Halo, like I feel, did a very very good job always expanding on the multiplayer, always bringing it to, like you're saying, the living room, and having other people there and having a great time and making it big and revolutionizing what it could be. Because I mean, we're even lucky to have the Halo CE multiplayer at all, because it was crammed in
Definitely.
like the last 2 weeks, and then Halo 2 went and took it away and made it online with other people and made chat and did all that, and again revolutionized what
And
multiplayer could be and whatnot. So if there's
here we
anything else,
go.
yeah, if there's anything else,
And here we go. Like back to our original point on the relevance of Halo.
mm-hmm,
You know, I think the biggest thing because Halo Infinite is going to bring back split screen co-op,
mm-hmm,
and so that is what will really bring Halo back to its roots. I believe Halo was defined as this game you can play with your friends, and I think Halo Infinite is exactly what's going to happen. That's going to revive that community of going to people's houses, of sitting on the couch to the wee hours of the just laughing at yourselves for killing yourself for the billionth time in some sort of Halo custom game, of just those moments, those memories are created, and that's why I think a lot of people hold the original trilogy in such high regard, is because of those memories that they had created, that they were given because of what Bungie had created with the original trilogy. And 343 going back to that with Halo Infinite is just, that is revolutionary in and of itself. Because most games today, you see, they're all multiplayer online only.
yeah, and a very, like in the last podcast we're talking about, dude, a party chat and not game chat. They're individualized. They I guess the companies, Microsoft and stuff, want people to buy their own
More
Xbox,
consoles.
yeah, and buy their
Which
own
I get
game. Yeah, I get it, but still, it sucks for those
for
memories.
people who,
Yeah.
right. And so I think that'll truly revive the Halo franchise of to build those memories again. And that's why I think Halo will be relevant once again. Everyone's together. 343 is making this insanely awesome Halo, and comes out next as a launch title with the next generation X. It's like our childhood all over.
Hopefully, yeah, like with Halo 4, where they, what we're saying now, I guess with this new perspective, at least that I see, they might be able to do it better. They might be able to fix those kind of areas and really release something that's hopefully, going to be revolutionary again and bring Halo back to the top. I've always hoped it, and I've always held it dear, close in my heart, with all the memories and the story and whatnot. And other games, have come close, and I really enjoy them and I give them the respect they deserve. But for me, only Halo has done it in the way that Halo can do it. So, Well, if there's anything else, man, that you wanted to talk about, any last bits that you want to come in, we're approaching on about 45 minutes here at the end of the podcast. If there's anything else you wanted to say or do, please speak now or forever hold your peace.
Forever hold about it.
All right. Well, thank you so
Good.
much then for coming on, Matt. Like, I really appreciate talking
Yeah,
to you and
thanks for having me.
whatnot. Like, here as we get closer to Christmas or the holidays, we're going to be coming on to a podcast where hopefully, guys, we have myself, Matt, who I've now introduced here in this podcast. We'll have Colin, who is in the multiplayer podcast, and Noah, the lore specialist I usually talk with on everything. And we're probably going to have like a 2-hour podcast. So for any of you guys who are interested, please keep subscribed. Feel free to check those out. Remember that these are also on SoundCloud as well for you guys that like to have this on the go. And I'm looking to get this possibly onto Apple Podcasts. But thank you so much, guys, for listening. I really appreciate it. Please remember to like and subscribe. Also, speaking of the memories that we all have, I host Halo 5 custom game nights every Friday from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and sometimes on Sunday, depending on if I have enough people or not. So feel free to come in and check those out. We're more than happy to have you on board. The more people, the better it is. We really, really enjoy doing that. We really enjoy still having those memories. So please feel free to come in and check those out. And I'll see you guys next time.